Well, good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Tech Talk. My name's David, and over the next 40 minutes, you'll be joining myself and our panelists to talk about the Leader and Committee Hub. Now, for those people who have not joined us before, this is a Microsoft Teams live event. It might be a little bit different to something that you've experienced before in the past. So as a viewer at home, you won't be able to share your video or audio, but if you do want to interact with our team, you can ask questions. So you should be seeing something that looks very similar to this. In the top right-hand corner is our Q&A panel. So all you need to do to ask a question is click on the question icon in the top right-hand corner and type your question to our panelists. We have quite a number of panelists on the call tonight, so they will be able to get to your questions at some point. If, however, we don't get to your questions, we will be posting them in the FAQ section on the website. So don't worry. We will try and get to as many as possible. Also, if you've got a really good question, it might disappear out of the My Questions area and be published in the All area. So that's just something to keep in mind. And if we do have some time as well, I'll try and answer some of your questions that you might have this evening. So as we're just waiting for another couple of people to join us, I'll go over who's joining with me tonight on the panels. So our presenters tonight, myself, obviously, I have, back by popular demand, Belle Francis, the newly appointed Deputy Chief Commissioner of Program, Youth Safety and Support, and our shining star from the State Office, Jared Hale, who works in the IT Systems Manager area and is one of the great guys that is working on the IT help desk when you raise a support ticket. So be kind. Of course, this week is week 3 out of a 4-week series. And what we're looking at is making the business of scouting smarter with the Leader and Committee Hub. So diving into the agenda a little bit deeper, we're going to recap on our vision. What is all this virtual Scout Hall and Leader and Committee stuff about? And why are we taking the time to roll this out for Scouts Australia and New South Wales? We're also going to talk a little bit about a serious topic, and that's our legal obligations as an organisation and what role you play as a leader in the group. We're going to introduce the Leader and Committee Hub. I'm sure you're going to be as excited as I am. And answering the really good question of what documents should be stored where. So to help us on our journey tonight, I have Belle Francis with me. How are you going, Belle?
Oh, one last time I'm well, thank you.
You're probably thinking, why is he asking me that question all the time? So, Belle, a couple of weeks ago, we congratulated you on your new appointment, and you shared with us a bit of a vision around the virtual Scout Halls and the Leader and Committee Hub. It's a few weeks on now, and we're getting some great news around, COVID-19, and things are starting to open up, but there's still a role for the virtual Scout Hall and, of course, the Leader Committee Hub. Can we maybe just touch on, again, for those people who are joining us for the first time tonight, what is Scouts New South Wales' vision around virtual Scout Halls, and more importantly, the Leader and Committee Hub tonight?
Okay, thanks, Dave. It does have a really important role to play. We operate in a very different environment than we did 30, 40, even 50 years ago. Our customers are different. The expectations of our families are very different. And as you know, through COVID, we've been locked in our homes wearing slippers and bad hair for weeks and weeks now. It's a way, virtual Scout Halls are a way for us to stay in touch with our members. It's a way for us to make sure we are able to continue to deliver scouting in some way. It hasn't been perfect. People want face-to-face scouting, but we haven't been able to do that. So we've done the very best job we can by providing a Scout Hall that's in a digital environment. There have been lots of changes over the last number of decades, and I'd like to talk about some of the recommendations that are on the screen now. One of the most impactful changes to Scouts was our attendance at the Royal Commission for Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse. It was an awful time for Scouts, along with many other organisations, and absolutely necessary for us to redress the terrible things that happened in the past. The outcomes of the Royal Commission were various. Scouts, I believe, was the first organisation to adopt every single recommendation, and these are some of them here. So what does this mean for us? It means that for us to commit to those recommendations, we have an obligation to control information in a much better way than we have in the past. There's lots of stories about how information has not been controlled in the past, but we need to be able to know who, what, why, where, when, everything about what we do and what our members are involved in. And you'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think Belle, look, it's a pretty heavy topic for a Thursday night. So I do appreciate that out in group land. And if we just maybe just break it down a little bit, we've got a few of the recommendations there. Centralise and control members' information and data. We do that already through ScoutLink, don't we?
We do. ScoutLink is our tool we've had for quite a few years now to do that. So it does allow us to have all of that information centralised. It's flawed, of course, by people updating their information, but it certainly centralises it. And to point to there, it keeps a record of all Scouts New South Wales membership and transfers. Again, very, very important for us.
Absolutely. And, keeping a record of what activities or major events members have attended, ScoutLink plays a role in that. But we've also rolled out CareMonkey to help with that as well, haven't we?
We have. And I think there's I can't recall the exact number, but the vast majority of groups in New South Wales are on CareMonkey and find it incredibly helpful, particularly with respect to specific information for specific youth members. It allows them to manage that very, very well.
And the last one there, I'm a little bit confused by that. 45 years of accessible storage management. That blows my mind. So they have to keep those records. Why do we have to keep that length of, 45 years of records? What's the meaning behind that?
It's something that has come out of the Royal Commission. I know when I first joined Scouts, I think it was 7 years that you had to keep records, 7 years after a youth member turned 18. With the Royal Commission being decades and decades of information, the recommendation is that we do have 45 years of accessible storage and management. So if you think about it, if a child joins Joey's at the age of 5, we need to retain every piece of information, every document, every photo, every form for that child until they turn 50. We can't do that in a box in the leader's den, and we certainly can't do it in somebody's garage or in the boot of their car.
Absolutely.
Safe.
Absolutely. And look, for those that are viewing tonight, just keep in mind that 45 years of accessible storage. And when Jared takes us through the Leader and Committee Hub, that is definitely Scouts New South Wales' answer to be able to address that problem, because trying to do that at home, put it in garages and boxes and all of those sorts of things is really not an organisational way to address this issue. But I think through the tools that we're rolling out, we're giving everybody the ability to be able to address that, aren't we?
That's absolutely right. And it's not just one person, it's a role that can be then transferred to the next person. So if we have one group leader moving out, that information is retained by Scouts, and the next group leader or leader in charge then assumes management of that information. So it keeps us safe, it keeps our members safe. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, I guess whilst we're on some heavy topics on a Thursday night, the next slide that we've got is a whole heap of legislative requirements, I can never say that properly, that we as an organisation need to adhere to. Now, I remember when I was a youth member, we actually had A1 forms as opposed to E1s and CareMonkeys. And I remember my scout leader, he had a file, it was at the end of the camp, he had a file full of these A1s, put it on the top of the car, drove off, and paper went everywhere. And of course we laughed. We did pick the papers up because the scout cares for the environment. But we just thought, it was a pretty funny situation. with the changes in legislation, especially around the Notifiable Data Breach Act, that's not really a funny situation anymore. It's got quite serious ramifications now, hasn't it?
It absolutely does, David, and not just for reputational damage, and it can be very damaging reputationally, financial penalties as well. Now, no organisation can afford to throw money out the window, and certainly not a not-for-profit like Scouts. So we do need to abide by these rules and legislations to safeguard ourselves personally and for the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the important message is that as a leader and a group leader, we've always stored this information. Like it's nothing new, but what we're doing from a Scouts New South Wales perspective is providing tools in a consistent manner that every single leader in Scouts New South Wales can use and store that information, as opposed to, and I think our next slide, does this ring any bells, Belle?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm sure there's people on this meeting tonight who won't even recognise the floppy disks. And I can't actually even remember the last time I saw a USB stick. Everything lives in the cloud. The cloud will last us a lot more than 45 years. It'll last us 145 years, and you can just keep putting information in there. So it is as safe as houses in the cloud.
Absolutely, and I think the really important message is don't overcomplicate things. This information has been stored on your computers or in boxes in the hall in the past. All we're saying is use the tools that we're giving you to store that information for the future, so you are personally protected and the organisation is protected. And I always hear that story. I think you told that story last time a couple of weeks ago, where when you got your first appointment, you were handed a couple of those brown boxes full of files.
Yep, and then I gave back twice as many when I handed over to somebody else. The thing about the tools that we have is they are, once you become familiar with them, they are very easy to use. For some people who use them every day, it's not an issue at all. But my recommendation is for people who are trying to get used to them, please bear with it, because it's going to make things a lot easier for us all with respect to how information is managed and stored and moved around and then able to be used at any point in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good message, and thank you. The State Office team have put together a little explainer video for probably the most commonly asked question around virtual Scout halls and the Leader Committee Hub. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll do a bit of a deeper dive where Jared will take us through what the Leader and Committee Hub actually looks like. I reckon that would have taken a lot of time playing with the Play-Doh there in the state office to get the video together. And that was pretty cool. And I guess the message there is that you've got a virtual scout hall. If you can see it on the walls in your virtual scout hall, then that's probably a good place to store that information. But if it's private, confidential, then stick it into the Leader and Committee Hub. And I've got on the line with me Jared from the State Office, who will start to demonstrate. We've heard a lot about the Leader and Committee Hub. What does it look like?
Hello everyone. I've just got the bad network quality little icon, so let's see how things go. For everyone who hasn't met me, I'm Jared. I'm the guy that's answering those emails very slowly. So we're going to show you basically the Leader and Community Hub, which is basically an extension of SharePoint. And let me just bring up my screen. So each group will effectively have their own SharePoint site, which will look something like this. It is a collection. Basically on the right hand side you'll see some links to some commonly used Scouts references, whether you're online forums, the websites, events, learning. There are the social media links as well, and also some abilities to get through to us, whether it's via comment or email or contact numbers as well. Here you'll see a news section where you can post news from your group that is specific to your group only. There are templates that you can do, or you can completely use all your own graphics. Down here, this is an activity feed, kind of like a timeline or an activity feed on Facebook. Over here, you've got the different file spaces that you can use. Now, right now you can see three of them. There's gallery, confidential, and secure. That's basically the top level of access, and only at a group level, only the group leader would see all three. Now, the group leader would have access to a confidential folder and everything below that. Below that, if you're a section leader, you would have access to everything in the secure folder and the gallery. If you are just a helper or someone that's been invited to be part of the group, all you would see is the public gallery, because these two folders would be basically blocked off because of your access level. Again, just like your Office 365 email addresses, it's all based on your appointment in ScoutLink. So this site will be set up with your permissions already set up, so you should be able to see the relevant folder repository here. It's kind of like a file structure that you see on your normal computer, and if you have played around in Teams, you may have seen SharePoint as well. But you can also navigate from this left-hand menu here. And again, I am looking at it from a group leader view, so I can see the secure folder, the confidential folder, and the gallery folder. Well, we'll just go into one to see what it looks like. Let's say we wanted to go into confidential. Good old MBO.
Now, whilst that's coming up, Jared, the Leader and Committee Hub is being rolled out across Scouts New South Wales, and I believe it should be available sometime first half of June. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we have been working to build this, and we actually started building this before the whole COVID-19 situation, and we had a solution that was coming, and everything's obviously been sped up to get things ready. But there was a lot of process involved in building 490 odd websites and making sure all the security groups were correct. So there wasn't any chance of anyone that's not licensed or has the permission to see files or anything that doesn't have that access. So as we're in here, we're actually in a confidential section. So again, the confidential would only be your group leader of this particular group. This is a dummy group we've got here for Zulu Scout Route, and only the group leader and anyone that he would share that file with would be able to see that. Just prevent, and this place would be a great place for files that obviously from a group level may be a little bit sensitive, whether it's things about the hall, so any financials about the hall, or there's a whole heap of other things that you wouldn't necessarily want to see other uniformed and helpers seeing, and that it is a good place to hold it and is secure, as opposed to a piece of paper on the in a folder in the back room of a scout hall, or the millions of floppy disks. And I've been to a memorabilia centre, so I know what it looks like. And
so Jared, I'm a group leader at the moment, and not really, but pretend to be a group leader at the moment, and I've got a whole bunch of files on my computer. Presumably at some point we'll get an email to say that my leader and committee hub is ready to go. And I want to get my files off my computer into this hub. What do I do? How does that work?
Okay, so we'll just give an example. Say you are a group leader, and let's say there's a bunch of files that aren't necessarily secure. There might be old flyers from old events. There might be old pictures. There's a whole range of things that could go in here. So it's basically just like if ever you've used a Dropbox or a Google Drive or any kind of online file storage, the basic navigation is the same. So what you could do here, if you wanted to bring all your files across, you'd go upload. Pick a file. You can do it all by folder or files. I'm not sure about the template option, so we'll just leave that one for now. So let's hope we go. All right. So we want to upload this file. Choose the file, hit open, and before long that file stays there. Now the good thing is your hard drive blows up, your house burns down, anything like that, this file stays here. And there's no issue of files getting lost or damaged or stolen. And this is a public gallery as well. If you ever need reference to those files anywhere in the world at any time on any device, you can grab that file.
So how am I going to get my link to my leader and committee hub? How's that rollout process going to work?
So as the sites are being rolled out, the group leader and the section leaders will receive an email with the link for their specific SharePoint site, and it'll give you all the details of what is available, what your access should be based on your appointment, as well as obviously the link for that Scout Hall. And that will be that as it rolls out and as it's ready, those emails will be delivered.
Excellent. No, that's great. Look, I can see that you're accessing your leader and committee hub through a web browser. For the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the virtual Scout Hall. If you don't mind, what I might do is jump into my Teams and show people out there how once they get their link, they might be able to link that leader and committee hub into Teams, so it's a little bit easier to navigate, if that's all right. So. And we'll go into Teams. Now you can see here, if you have been following our series, we've got our virtual Scout group, or Scout Hall, and we've got our sectional channels, which are public channels. And you can see here, I've got a leaders channel with a padlock on it. So this is a private channel that we've restricted access to. And I've just got my email off Scouts New South Wales. Really excited because I've got my leader and committee hub, but I want to make it nice and easy for everybody to access because they're going to the virtual Scout Hall pretty much every week now. So if you didn't see that, I just hit the little plus sign and I selected SharePoint. Let's go through that again just really quickly, just to add a tab in the leaders channel. I'm just going to add SharePoint, and I'm going to add page or list from any SharePoint site. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to paste in the link that comes in my email and hit save. And as you can see, there is my leader and committee hub. Same access, everything's the same. We can see that Jared uploaded his file there, so it's now coming up in my gallery. So everything is identical. The permissions, as Jared indicated, are driven by Scout Link to see these, to see this page and to see the assets in there. Now, Jared, if it's not coming up properly, what should people do? You know, if I'm a sectional leader and I haven't got permissions, what's the process there?
So the first step, I guess, would be to make sure that your appointment is correct in ScoutLink. A lot of the times, you may have maybe been elevated to a section leader or have a different appointment, but it's not fully put through in ScoutLink. And if it's not through in ScoutLink, it won't filter through to the security settings on the page itself. So just shoot us an email, and we can obviously check out the ScoutLink appointments and make sure the security groups have been set. It is automated, and there can be a little bit of a delay. So generally that script will run, every 24 to 48 hours. So, it's not instant, but it should be automatic based on your appointment in ScoutLink.
Yeah, absolutely. So, good to know. And I think the important part here is that we have got the leader and committee hub being rolled out for everybody, but as we've just demonstrated there. To try and keep it simple, if you've got leaders that are always accessing your virtual Scout group, we can easily put a tab in there or a link so they don't have to switch between the sites. Doesn't mean you have to. You can bookmark the site. I think it actually says in the email that shows you how to bookmark the leader and committee hub as well. But this is just another way to try and keep the resources together. Just one thing to note though, if you did want to break this out, just this little expand tab here, so that will make it full screen, so it gives you a little bit more of a view, and if you do want to have a look at it from a web browser, you can just click on that as well. It just means that your leaders or people within the group are not constantly switching between everything. They just open up Teams and here is everything as well. So looks pretty straightforward. I guess at this particular point in time for our panelists, I can see a few questions coming through. Have we got any good ones out there that we can maybe share with our viewers at home to answer?
There has been a few, or more than a few, that have come through, to say the least. We're furiously typing back here. There has been a couple, so some people came in halfway through and missed the start and just kind of missed how they actually access SharePoint. And so we were talking about how obviously there'll be an email go out with a link to those that get access. So maybe if you just want to expand upon that, that's probably a good one.
Yeah, sure. So I think, Jared, you were saying that, I guess to start off with, Jared, who has access to the leader and committee hub? What roles?
So the leader and committee hub will be accessible by obviously leaders and people that are within a committee. So your treasurers, your secretaries, your Cub Scout leaders, assistant Cub Scout leaders, all the way up to your group leader, DC and RCs, if anyone's watching.
Yep. And those positions are maintained within ScoutLink. So what we're saying is, as providing your details are correct in ScoutLink, you will receive an email with your personalised leader and committee hub link. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. We actually at Scouts in the head office, we call ScoutLink our source of truth. And so we drive everything from ScoutLink. So all of the emails, all of the appointments, all of the permissions, it's based there. So if there's no issue there, then we have a problem. But effectively, if ScoutLink is right, everything should be right.
Excellent. So as we know from our past weeks, tech talks, for those people who haven't activated their email address, please make sure that your primary email address is correct in ScoutLink. And as soon as you activate your at nsw.scouts.com.au email address, it will automatically update ScoutLink for you there. So that's a good one. Have we got any other questions that we can share?
Yes, we had a question around, obviously we've talked about section leaders and group leaders, committee leader members having access. There was a few questions about RCs and DCs. Do they get a site? So we can confirm that yes, regions get a site as well. So there was a few questions around that, and then we had lots of comments, or a few comments, about a good use for the Leader and Committee Hub, and someone suggested using it to store risk assessments for activities, which is a great idea.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Like, I think just going back to that explainer video, if it's related to the youth program, so keeping in mind that we are a youth leading adult supporting organisation, that our program resources live within the virtual scout group or virtual scout hall, and then non-program related or potentially sensitive or commercially sensitive information lives in the Leader and Committee Hub. So depending on the age group, you might say that some of the risk assessments in the venture section should actually be driven by the youth and reviewed by the adults. Whereas in our younger sections, the full risk assessments would be facilitated potentially by our adults, as opposed to detailed risk assessments by maybe Joey's. So yeah, absolutely. Just think of it that way. If it's youth program orientated, it lives in the virtual scout hall. If it's essentially anything else, and especially if it's potentially commercially sensitive or falls under the Privacy Act, our Leader and Committee Hub is the place to store that information.
And when it comes to the Leader and Committee Hub, we're not prescribing a particular way to use it. We trust in the common sense, I guess, of our members, and use the various parts that are appropriate for the content, and use your best judgment. We're not policing it, we're not checking it, but it is a way to store files that you deem necessary for those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I might like to at this point in time just invite Belle back. Belle, you've been on this project for a little while now, and tonight is essentially our unveiling of the Leader and Committee Hub. It's pretty exciting to be able to see some of these tools to be able to address some of those pretty heavy topics that we talked about earlier, isn't it?
It is. I think anything we can do to make things easier for our leaders, it's got to be a bonus. And this is something which will just go on and on, unlike a box of documents in your garage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really the most important thing here is that we're not asking leaders out there to generate any new documents or go through any new requirements. We're just saying, instead of storing your documents in the hall or on your computer, put them in the Leader and Committee Hub.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Just picking up on a point that was made before about ScoutLink, really important to make sure your details in ScoutLink are right. So there's all sorts of ways you can make that happen. But the only thing we really need to do is be aware of the tools that are available to us. So whether we're a group leader or a chair or a leader of youth or even a parent, the tools that we have, in this case, the Leader and Committee Hub, is brilliant to allow us to meet our obligations, our legal obligations, as well as things like auditing and reporting, data retention, preservation requirements, all of those things which are really important in a contemporary world. Yeah,
absolutely. And couldn't have said it better myself. And I think these particular tools make addressing such complex issues, quite straightforward in the world that we're living with so many requirements that we have to meet. So I think, have we got any more questions? Because I think I was about to say we're almost running out of time. So if we've got any more questions from the panelists? They're madly typing. We usually get a couple of hundred questions flow through in the space of an hour. So I can see their fingers are madly typing away and scrolling through at the moment. But it's always good to try and get a few questions out in these sessions.
We did have an interesting one that probably I think a lot of people can identify with. And one is someone said, what about that big box of documents that I got handed when I took over the role? Do I need to go and scan all of that in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll be interested to see Belle's point of view on it as well. Look, if possible, I would suggest that you need to have a conversation, with your support within the district or region to try and start doing that. We're certainly not saying you have to go and do that tomorrow, but if you understand the notifiable data breach legislation and what that means to you personally, for my own peace of mind, I know that all of my records are stored digitally and I don't have anything on paper anymore, and I've gone through that process just for my own peace of mind. But Belle, what's I guess your view, because it's a pretty big undertaking if you've got 10 or 20 boxes sitting out of the back of the Scout Hall.
Yeah, look, it is a big one, and our leaders and their families have a whole lot of expectations on them as it is. Ideally, if I had a magic wand, I would say yes, it would be ideal to digitise anything that's sitting in a box or sitting on a shelf in the leaders' den. You may have to call on help. We have different people we can call on across the state. My suggestion would be that you speak to your region office and see if they have any people who are regular helpers and who may be able to help with the digitisation of physical paperwork.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important message for now is that get familiar with the tools, transition to them, so you're not storing any new information in those boxes or on your local computer. And as time progresses, try and get that information out of those boxes into the Leader and Committee Hub, because at the end of the day, the Royal Commission has made those recommendations, so we do need to keep those records for 45 years. So it's going to make your life or the group's life a lot easier when we transition all of those records into an electronic format. Guys, I think we've got time for maybe one more question, and then we might have to wrap it up this evening. And of course, whilst they're just looking through the questions to pick one out, if you do need help, helpdesk@nsw.scouts.com.au is the email address. There's also the link there to raise a support ticket. And we do value your feedback. So please let us know what you think of these Tech Talks. There will be a link to a survey that's sent out. Unfortunately, this is week 3 of 4. So next week will be our last week. So hopefully you've had a lot of value. We would like to hear from you to see what content, if there's anything that we've missed, that you would like to see or repeated in next week's Tech Talk. But one more question.
Yes, we had a question from a member saying, obviously, as permissions to the Leader and Committee Hub are out of ScoutLink, what happens when a leader takes on a role that is not their primary appointment and has not completed the training for the appointment as such? So obviously we need to go back to that question and say yes, all the permissions are definitely driven out of ScoutLink, and you do need to be holding that appointment in ScoutLink to get access. But if there is ever a concern about someone that needs access that doesn't, then obviously reach out to us, and we can help you. It's never a matter of you just can't. We'll just say no. We'll be able to chat through that situation for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think that's a really important message there. Is that the permissions are driven out of ScoutLink and by the appointment, and it's not there designed to be a barrier. So reach out to us, use the help desk, the link or the email to gain access. We're certainly here to enable you. The reason why the permissions are driven out of ScoutLink is really important, and it actually addresses one of the recommendations out of the Royal Commission. And one of those recommendations is that you need to be an active member of Scouting to have access to some of that commercially or private information. So if you think about potentially people that have left the organisation, We need to be able to, to prevent access to certain types of information, especially youth members' information. So that's one of the key recommendations there out of the Royal Commission. So that's the reason why it's been driven that way. So I think we're just out of time now. So just to recap, we do like your feedback. So please, when the survey does go out, please take the time to fill it out. And of course, your comments and input will help shape the final edition of this series of Tech Talks. Next week, we'll do a little bit deeper dive into the Leader and Committee Hub and how we collaborate on files, and also how we can use it to potentially sync to local computer. And we're also going to show you a little bit difference between Teams live events, which is what we're using right now, and how you might use a Teams live event with an ARP or training versus a Teams normal meeting. So thanks very much. My name's David, and we've spent the last 40 minutes talking about the Leader and Committee Hub, and I look forward to catching up with you next week on Next Week Tech Talk.